Andrew Tackett has been dominating the Jiu Jitsu scene for years with his wrestling, beating some of the scene's most beloved grapplers like O'Flanagan and Nicky Ryan, casually having the greatest Jiu Jitsu match in history, to now being the real face of UFC Jiu Jitsu. None of this crap that you see every time you doom scrolling on Instagram. He's been able to do this as he has the most effective wrestling for Jiu Jitsu. Now, there is a lot of confusion and disagreements on how wrestling should be done in our sport. However, if you follow Andrew's system and tactics, not only will you have unstoppable wrestling and takedown control, but you will also have less confusion about how you should approach wrestling in Jiu Jitsu. I have watched and studied every Tackett match in the past 3 years, then analyse where his game exceeds the less effective grapplers in our sport, and how it correlates with how the best stand-up grapplers approach this topic. In this video we're going to go through his system, his philosophy when standing, how he enters the takedown, the techniques he uses, the main counter he faces, then finally how he controls the aftermath of the takedown. Let's get into it. Before we look at anything else, we need to understand where takedowns in Jiu Jitsu differ from wrestling. In freestyle wrestling, if we hit a takedown, we score instantly. In Jiu Jitsu, you either need 3 seconds of control where we have our opponent's hips on the mat, or we have to keep at least one knee or elbow on the mat, again for 3 seconds, if our takedown ends in a turtle scenario. Not to mention our opponent can use submissions to finish, threaten, and sweep us once we hit our takedown. Therefore, when we approach wrestling, the aftermath of the takedown is often more important than the takedown itself. A simple, loose way of understanding what takedown is therefore safe and effective for the scoring system of Jiu Jitsu is this. The lower down the body we hit and finish our takedown, the higher the chance our opponent can scramble back to neutral, use submissions, or initiate sweeps. Whereas the higher up the body we finish our takedown, such as body locks or the front headlock, the chances our opponent scrambling and subbing us severely decreases. Therefore, the odds of us pinning, controlling, and scoring drastically increases. This is important for how Andrew approaches his wrestling, and how he controls his opponents so effectively after the takedown has been hit. Now that we understand this key concept, we can look at how he enters his takedowns. To begin with, listen to John Danner explain one of the most effective takedown strategies in the sport, and we'll see how this applies to Andrew.
It's my personal belief that body locks and the transition from leg attacks to body locks is probably the single most high percentage way to work in competitive submission grappling.
Leg tackles to body locks. This encompasses how Andrew begins his takedown system. His ultimate goal is to get to the body lock, so let's take a deeper dive on this idea. To get a body lock, we need space by our opponent's elbows. There's 2 main ways you can open up this space. The most common is through the use of the collar tie. You'll see the Kingsway team use this strategy a lot, frequently collar tying to tire our opposition out. As each time we collar tie and our opponent goes from this hinged state back to an upright posture, their imaginary stamina bar slowly decreases. And if these collar ties keep occurring, they'll eventually be so tired that any takedown works. It also opens up space between the elbows. As we collar tie and force our opponent to step, to maintain their balance and stance, a slight amount of space will open up by the elbows, which is where we can shoot underhooks and ultimately body locks after. If this strategy doesn't work, this is where we go for our second option. That is to shoot low, then climb high. As we shoot a takedown, your opponent will look to sprawl and begin defending. In this defense, to maintain their balance, their elbows will open, to better distribute their weight in an attempt to defend the initial takedown. They will also likely accept an overhook, to prevent you sliding to their back, or to counter with Uchimata, which will be touched on later. When they do this, we can enter a body lock or underhook scenario again. Now, if you've ever tried shooting a takedown, which you should have done at least once, even if you are a guard puller, you'll know that this is harder than it looks. As if we just shoot willy-nilly, your opponent will put a down block hand in, sprawl, and stuff you takedown. Or even hit counter offense like Gordon does here into an arm drag. This is where our collar tie comes into play, and we see the dilemma that Andrew uses. He collar ties to tire his opponents out. If they don't clear it, he'll take an underhook, then body lock. So his opponents will defend and respect the threat of the collar tie. As they do this, their hands come high, which eliminates a down block hand that would ultimately stuff our takedown. Andrew will fake high, forcing their hands high, then shoot low. If he gets the takedown, then perfect. But if not, then he will climb high up into the body lock. This dilemma is used in every match. Now let's look at the Bodylock system Andrew uses to finish every takedown. Like we just spoke about, a lot of the time Andrew will fake the collar tie to eliminate the down block hand and finish a double or single leg. But against better opponents, he has to use his main strategy, which is bodylock or underhooks. The concepts and control for these are quite similar, so let's look at what he does. Firstly, his opponent has to take a whizzer to prevent Andrew shucking to the back. Keep this in mind. Out of all of his matches, there are two main takedowns he hits. Both work in conjunction together. Firstly, Andrew will look to off-balance immediately from this position, as his opponents can't begin to defend or counter if they can't stabilise themselves. He will use this destabilisation to hit a knee tap. Normally we would look to circle in front to the lead leg, forcing it to step closer to us, shifting their hips in front of ours so we can get a stronger finish as we begin to drive through them. However, Andrew normally bypasses all this and just sends it without a setup. One, because he's a good athlete, but secondly, because he mainly competes at ADCC or in a pit where there are no restrictions on mat space or boundaries. So to defend this, his opponents have to stabilise their base to not get taken down and scored on. To do this, they will often release the whizzer, and the second that whizzer comes out, he can take the back like we mentioned earlier. To hit this slide by, Andrew leads with his hips and bows his face to the floor, so their arm doesn't get trapped on his head. He steps his lead leg as deep as possible with his arm going the same direction. Now we can begin attacking the rear body lock and score, or jump to insert two hooks and take the back. With this knee tap slide by dilemma, it becomes very tricky for anyone to defend when he gets to this body lock position. However, there is one counter that was able to beat Andrew's system. Cade Ruotolo was the only person to counter Andrew's wrestling in recent matches. How? Through the use of the Uchimata. Let's look at how this is the ultimate counter to this system and how we can nullify it. To be able to hit any overhook judo throw, we need our opponent's hips above ours, and for them to be in a posture where their hips are away and their spine is curved. When their posture is like this, their weight is moving forwards, and their legs are marginally lighter, making throws that pull them forward stronger. Notice how Andrew is in this posture, giving Cade the ability to step in and begin hitting an Uchimata. To rectify this, we need to make sure we do the opposite. Andrew's hips need to be in and slightly below Cade's. If Andrew and Cade's spines both stay straight, it will be incredibly tough for him to get the elevation and power necessary to hit a throw. The problem is though, as Andrew shoots from legs to body lock, there will always be a window where he will have this poor posture. It's unavoidable. Therefore yes, he needs to be quick, but also be focused on destabilising Cade as he climbs up. There's three ways he can do this: by elevating him, disrupting his footwork, and shifting his weight, as this will also improve the likelihood of defending the throw. However, Andrew hit all three of these metrics in this example, and he still got taken down. Does that mean this is a bad system? No. Every technique or method has a counter. We just need to be wise to it so we can nullify its effectiveness. We have spoken a lot about how he gets his takedown, but as we mentioned earlier, we need to control our opponent for 3 seconds to score and not get subbed, swept, or allow them to scramble back to neutral. Before we get to the last part, there's been a lot of information in this video so far, and it can be hard to remember and therefore put this system into practice in your own training. To help those of you who want to implement this for yourself, I've made a flowchart on Andrew's takedown system. It has technique pointers and an easy yes-no system that will allow you to implement this strategy in sparring straight away. The link to this is in the description below. Secondly, I gained all these clips and ability to study competition matches easily with the Outlier database. It's such a great tool for studying and saves hours of my time. Use code ROB for $10 off your first month, and let's get back to the video and the final step in the system. At the beginning of this study, we spoke about how finishing our takedowns higher up the body is synonymous with a decreased ability for our opponent's ability to sub, sweep, or scramble. How is this possible? For our opponent to sub us, they primarily need to go into some variation of a front headlock attack. Most commonly, this comes in the form of a guillotine. However, when we have our hands locked around their waist or higher, it becomes very difficult for them to pass our head under their armpit, or position their arms in a place where they can feed their hand through for the submission. As popular as the guillotine is for takedown defense at the lower belts, you rarely see it be hit at the higher levels. Instead, they choose to scramble. To do this, they need to be able to place their feet under their bum, so they can turn their hips or shoulders to turtle and heist. The benefit again to bodylock takedowns is we often finish chest to chest, which puts us in a scenario where our opponent can't turn their shoulders, as you'll often land past the legs inside control, or you'll land covering the legs and hips, making it near impossible for them to turn and heist. Here against the bigger athletic Dory, he is able to keep him pinned with ease, landing chest to chest. Or even slightly raising our hands up the waist after completing our takedown can make their heist harder, as you can see in this combat jiu-jitsu match where your opponent is not going to accept a bottom position. This is what makes Andrew's wrestling so effective. Not only does he have a simple yet unstoppable system when standing, but he also has one of the best means of controlling the takedown on the mat, which is one of the most underlooked and developed parts of jiu-jitsu today. And if you follow this system, you too can have unstoppable wrestling. Thank you for watching. If this was helpful, a like and a subscribe goes a long way in letting me know you want more videos like this. Links to Andrew's flowchart and the outlier database are down in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, you will also like this guard retention study on Levi. Thank you.